So moving on, now we're going to talk about how we define if something is living or non-living. I want to ask you guys. So before I do that, actually, let me go over some requirements that we have for the living things. These are three requirements they must meet. So they require energy and nutrients. We are living. We require food and energy. They can sense and respond to change in the environment. So even if it's bacteria or even ants, if it gets too hot, they move on to maybe different place. So they're responding to the environment. They reproduce with the help of DNA. It can be so they're able to reproduce on their own. Now the question I have for you guys is, tell me if you think bacteria is living or non-living. Living, right? One person said non-living. Bacteria is living. If you maybe brush your mouth at night before you go to sleep, the bacteria is able to multiply in 20 to 30 minutes. So it's gonna be increased in number in the morning. So they're able to reproduce. They are eating on your teeth or the sugars that you eat, so they are eating the nutrients. And they can even sense and respond to change. They can move on to different location in your mouth, maybe if they don't feel safe in one place. So they are living. What about viruses? Non-living?
Non-living.
Non-living. Now I would like you guys to tell me why they're non-living, they're considered non-living. George, you want to tell me, or
Not metabolized.
did you say non-metabolized?
Yes.
Okay, so she's saying basically they don't require energy or nutrients, right, Truth? They don't do any metabolism, they don't eat, they don't grow.
They do grow, but
Can they reproduce? Can they reproduce on their own?
we cannot hear you.
No, they are not, because they are not made out of cells.
They're not made of cells. They cannot reproduce on their own. The way they reproduce is they need a host to reproduce. They enter your body, coronavirus enters your body, they start to multiply using the machinery of the host. So they cannot reproduce outside the host. If you take all the humans away and the virus is living on humans, they're going to go extinct right away. So they need a host in order to live or reproduce, basically. So they're not considered living if they're outside. They don't grow or eat nutrients when they're outside. So they need to have a host. So they're not meeting this requirement. So they're considered non-living. So viruses are non-living. And they're made up of this protein coat. There's no cells there. It can be DNA or RNA. Does that make sense? Yes. Okay, so next thing we're going to talk about the nutrients and energy. I want you to make note of two things. Energy is one-way flow. Nutrients, they recycle. So energy, most of it comes from the sun, flows through the plants, primary consumers, secondary consumers, so herbivores and carnivores, and then decomposers. And then at every step, some of it gets lost in the environment, but it's one-way flow. From decomposers, it's not, going back here. So it's one-way flow. Whereas nutrients, let's say animals, they eat food. That's nutrients. And they produce waste. The waste, or when they die, all the carbon nitrogen goes back to the soil, and that provides it nutrients for the soil, and the plants grow there. So that's a cycle. So nutrients going to recycle, whereas energy is going to be one-way flow. So please make a note of that. So here's another photo. It's talking about producers and consumers. Producers are mainly plants, but there is some bacteria that's considered producers. So I'm going to show you that in a minute. And then the consumers are something that's going to feed on producers. But the nutrients that get incorporated into the cells of producers and consumers, they're released back into the environment, they decompose, and then the producers again take up those nutrients from soil to grow again, if we're talking about plants. So here we have a plant taking energy from the sunlight and it's taking nutrients from the soil. The caterpillar is eating on those plants. And then once this caterpillar decomposes, those nutrients are going to go back to the soil. Does that make sense? So when I ask you guys if it's making sense, let me know so I can move on. Otherwise, I would like to, give you a little bit more explanation on that if it's not making sense. So just give me maybe a thumbs up when I ask that, okay? Okay, so here is showing a plant doing photosynthesis using sunlight. So they're the producers, mainly 90% maybe. Anybody knows what this is here in this photo?
Algae, I care. Right.
Algae, did you say?
Mm-hmm.
No, that's not algae. Anybody else?
The fungus, right?
Fungus? It's not fungus either. It's underwater. Can you guys tell it's underwater?
Is it spirogel?
Coral reef, Anthony said. So it's hydrothermal vent. It's really, really deep in the ocean and there's no sunlight reaching there. So we talked about producers. So here sunlight is reaching, producers are able to take energy from here. So here there's no sunlight reaching, but there is some bacteria that's able to break down these minerals and that it's able to provide energy to these plants here. And they are also considered producers. Even though there's no sunlight, they're still able to do that. So mostly it's plants, but there is some bacteria that's able to do that. So organisms that make their own food using energy and simple raw materials from the environment. It's basically able to use only the minerals and do that. So we have the producers, those are plants mainly, and some bacteria. Consumers, and also includes us, we depend on the producers, and then they're decomposers, it's mainly fungus. Fungus is going to decompose. Consumers are the organisms that get energy and carbon by feeding on the tissues, waste, or remains of other organisms. So we get energy by eating maybe plants. We even eat some, if you are not a vegetarian, you eat meat maybe. So that's how we get energy. And once maybe we die, all those carbon, all the nutrients, all the nitrogen goes back to the soil and they get recycled. So responding to the change, we talked about this characteristic in this photo. You can see some plants are there. And if you have a plant and you place it near the window, you're gonna notice it's gonna go towards the light source. And that's responding to the sunlight, to the environment basically. So they can respond to change. And in this photo, maybe this person's hungry and they have low blood sugar and that's why they want some sugar. So organisms keep conditions in the internal environment within a range. If you have a fever, that means your temperature is higher than the range that your body has, than the normal range. If you go to maybe Lake Tahoe, you jump in really cold water and that will give you hypothermia, but that means it's gonna drop your temperature really low than the range that it's supposed to be in. That range is called homeostasis. So we're gonna talk about that. Same thing about the photo about eating the donut. That means if your blood sugar is too low, you need to eat to bring it to the normal range. If it remains like that, it might cause some health issues. So that's called homeostasis. Homeostasis is a set of processes in which you keep your internal environment stable in that range. So let's say you have your thermostat and it's winter and you put it to 70 degrees. So that's the set point. Then the temperature drops, maybe it gets cold. It's gonna turn on and it's gonna warm up the room. It's gonna produce some heat. And then the temperature of the room comes back to 70. It's gonna turn off. So that's a negative feedback loop, basically producing something or maybe eating when your sugar is low and it comes back to normal. And then if there's extra sugar, your liver takes it up and stores it. So here, another example, we have sugar. So people who cannot basically, if they can't keep their sugar level in the range, do you guys know what they have? If they're unable to maybe produce insulin or maybe diabetes, right? So if you eat sugar and your pancreas is not producing insulin to stimulate the uptake of the sugar by the liver, then you might have high blood sugar and you might have to keep some diet or take some medication in order to keep that in the range. And that means maybe your pancreas is not working properly, or maybe your liver is not working properly. It can be either or. So when your blood sugar gets low, your liver can release some sugar. So that's going to bring it to normal. If it's high, then it's going to be stored in the liver. So that's homeostasis. I want to know if a homeostasis, you guys are understanding it good. Does that make sense to you guys, what homeostasis is now? It's one of the concepts.
I believe what you actually meant was that it serves as a regulator that keeps the inside body stable at all times.
It's a set of processes that regulate the temperature, or they regulate blood sugar, or anything that's basically keeping the internal environment stable. Okay, so next one we have organisms grow, develop, reproduce based on the information in the DNA that they get from the parents. So that's another trait we have. So growth, it can mean increasing in size. That means just getting bigger and bigger and bigger in size. Your cells are just getting bigger and bigger. And then there is development. That's what we go through. A lot of animals go through this as well. Basically, you start with a stem cell. Those stem cells can become anything in your body. They can become your brain. They can become your liver. They can become your small intestine. So you develop. You have these different stages of development where these stem cells become specific things. And if you look at the babies, newborn baby, you're gonna notice their head is, pretty big compared to all their other body parts. And over time, their head might grow a little bit, but their other body parts grow a lot. So that's development. So multi-step process by which first cells of a new individual become multicellular adult. So that's development versus growth. This in this photo, this is the whale shark. That's the biggest fish out there, and it just increases in size. And then we have reproduction, and that's a process by which parents produce offspring. Reproduction can be sexual reproduction, or it can be asexual. In this photo, we have grass. So it just grows these rhizomes. Rhizomes are the roots underground, and more grass grows. That's asexual reproduction. And you notice this looks exactly the same as the next plant here, or grass here. So this is asexual. There's not a lot of variation. Then there's sexual reproduction. That requires male and female. You guys know who this is? This famous celebrity. Madonna. And this is her daughter, Lourdes, I think her name is. So even before DNA fingerprinting came around, even we knew about DNA, by just looking at them, you can tell they're related. So that's sexual reproduction requires male and female, and it gives you more variation. She doesn't look exactly the same, she just looks similar. So there's a lot more variation compared to the asexual reproduction. And being able to pass on those genes to your offspring is called inheritance. That's transmission of DNA from parents to offspring. So that's inheritance. So there's a question for you guys. Which of following statements is true about reproduction?